The box had been sitting in the middle of the living room for most of the afternoon, quietly claiming space as if it belonged there more than anything else in the house. No one remembered placing it there. In a home like this, things rarely arrived with explanation. They simply appeared, like overdue bills, like opinions no one asked for, like family members who stayed longer than expected. Dan stood over it with the cautious curiosity of a man who had learned that surprises rarely worked in his favor. He rested his hands on his hips and leaned forward slightly, studying the contents. "Well," he said after a long pause, his voice thoughtful in the way it only became when something made absolutely no sense. "This is a good box." Darlene stepped closer, folding her arms as she peered inside. Her expression shifted from mild interest to quiet confusion. Inside the box lay a strange assortment of items that felt less like belongings and more like clues from a story no one had agreed to tell. "There is a foot," Dan continued, pointing carefully. "On a hook." Darlene leaned in further. "A fake foot," she said. "Hopefully." Dan nodded slowly. "Given the season, I am choosing to believe that." Next to it rested something that looked equally questionable. "And what I am going to call," Dan added, lifting it slightly with 2 fingers, "a dissected alien." Darlene shrugged. "Craft project. Or someone had a very creative childhood." She reached deeper into the box and pulled out a stack of papers, flipping through them with growing disbelief. "Oh," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Tax returns." Dan let out a low whistle. "Now that is scary." Darlene smirked. "According to these, the government believes we have a home office." Dan glanced around the cluttered room, taking in the mismatched furniture, the stack of unpaid mail, and a chair that had been broken for longer than anyone could remember. "If this is an office," he said, "we have been doing business very wrong." Before the mystery of the box could unfold any further, the front door burst open with the unmistakable energy of someone carrying good news like a trophy. Becky rushed inside, breathless and glowing, her excitement spilling out ahead of her words. "You guys are not going to believe this," she announced. Dan and Darlene exchanged a look that said they had heard that sentence many times before, and it rarely ended quietly. "I passed my driving test," Becky declared. There was a brief silence. Not disbelief exactly, but something close to it. A moment where reality hesitated. "Apparently," Becky added with a proud grin, "today is Pass Everyone Day." Darlene blinked slowly. "Come on." "What?" Becky said defensively. "I am not that bad a driver." Dan crossed his arms. "I let you drive home. And you made a garbage truck swerve." Becky waved her hand dismissively. "That is an exaggeration." "It went up on 2 wheels, Dan replied. "That is not something people forget." "It was stopping at every house," Becky argued. "That is what garbage trucks do," Darlene said calmly. Becky paused, considering that. "Okay, that part might be true." "And then," Dan continued, clearly enjoying himself now, "you dragged a traffic cone almost the entire way home." "It was mostly behind us," Becky muttered. "Luckily," Darlene added, "some kid on a skateboard knocked it loose." Becky collapsed onto the couch with a dramatic sigh. "I need a drink." She glanced toward the kitchen as if expecting answers to appear. "Becky," she said to herself with tired humor, "where do you keep the hard stuff?" "In Becky," Darlene replied instantly. That earned a reluctant smile. Becky leaned forward again, hope returning. "So," she said carefully, "can I use Grandma's old car now?" Dan did not hesitate. "Yes." Becky lit up. "But not to drive." Her excitement dropped just as quickly. "You can sit in it," Dan continued. "Turn on the radio, and go vroom vroom." Darlene nodded. "Your imagination is the road to anywhere." Becky groaned. "I really need a job." She sat up straighter, shifting her tone as if trying to sell herself. "And I love house cleaning," she added. Darlene tilted her head. "Is it topless?" Becky blinked. "Well, that explains the $40 an hour." Dan leaned forward immediately. $40 an hour? Yes. Do they take men? Dan asked seriously. Because for that kind of money, I am willing to show off the girls. Darlene slowly turned her head toward him. I am going to pretend you did not say that. Becky sighed. I am going to pass on that job. Then she added with a small grin. But I will give your number to my sister. Dan pointed at her. That is support. The moment settled, and Becky suddenly clapped her hands together. Okay, she said, her energy returning. Since I have you all here, I want to show you my costume. She disappeared down the hallway and returned moments later. When she stepped back into the room, there was a pause long enough to be meaningful. Well, she said, striking a confident pose. Darlene studied her carefully. You are committed. I am a disemboweled cheerleader, Becky announced proudly. Dan nodded slowly. You certainly made choices. Darlene smirked. Gory and confident. That is a combination. Becky spun slightly, clearly pleased. I am bringing a friend to the party. That shifted the energy. Oh, Darlene said. And it is starting to feel like something, Becky continued, trying to sound casual. So you are showing off, Dan said. A little, Becky admitted. A little leg. And a little intestine, Darlene added. Becky smiled. He is a lucky guy? Dan folded his arms. What is his name? Peter. Darlene perked up. Oh, Peter. Becky pointed at them both. I want your opinion. Dan opened his mouth. But I do not want you teasing him, Becky added quickly. Darlene placed a hand on her chest. Us. This family, Becky said, has a history of chasing off every unstable man I bring home. Dan nodded. We have standards. But Peter is different, Becky insisted. Darlene smiled faintly. They are always different. I am serious, Becky said firmly. No teasing. Dan raised his hands. We will behave. Darlene added. You have not dated anyone in forever. We are not going to mess with whatever wounded animal you dragged in. Becky stared at her. Darlene shrugged. That was supportive. Outside, the evening was slowly shifting toward night, carrying with it the quiet promise of Halloween. Inside the house, the noise, the jokes, and the constant motion continued as they always did. In this family, nothing was perfect. But somehow, in the middle of the chaos, everything that mattered was already there. The box sat in the middle of the living room like a forgotten treasure, dusty at the corners, slightly torn along one side, and yet strangely inviting. Dan nudged it with his foot before finally crouching down to open it. His expression shifted almost instantly from boredom to curiosity. Well now, this is a good box, he said, lifting out the first item. A fake bloody foot dangled from a hook, swaying slightly as if it still remembered motion. Beneath it lay something that looked like a dissected alien, rubbery and oddly detailed. Jackie leaned over his shoulder and let out a soft whistle. Now that is commitment to Halloween, she said. Becky, standing behind them with crossed arms, spotted a stack of papers beneath the props. She pulled them out carefully, flipping through them with exaggerated seriousness. Tax returns, she announced. Apparently the government believes we have a home office. That earned a round of laughter, though it was the kind that came from familiarity rather than surprise. This house had always been a strange mix of chaos and warmth, where absurdity felt like a normal Tuesday. Suddenly, the front door burst open and Darlene rushed in, her face glowing with excitement. You are not going to believe this, she said, barely catching her breath. I passed my driving test. The room fell silent for a beat. Then Dan raised an eyebrow. Apparently, it is pass everyone day. He replied dryly. Hey, I am not that bad a driver. Darlene protested. Jackie stepped forward immediately, her voice full of dramatic disbelief. Not that bad. I let you drive home once and you made a garbage truck swerve. I have never seen something that big tilt like that. It looked like it was stopping at every house. Becky added. That is what they do. Darlene insisted. And then you dragged a traffic cone halfway across town. Jackie continued. If that kid had not hit it with his skateboard, we would still be attached to it. Darlene sighed and dropped onto the couch. I need a drink. Becky smirked. The hard stuff is in Becky. The conversation drifted naturally, as it always did, from chaos to something resembling planning. Darlene, still riding the high of her newly earned license, leaned forward. So can I use Grandma's old car now? Dan did not even look up. Sure. You can sit in it. Turn on the radio. And make engine noises. Your imagination is the road to anywhere. Darlene groaned. But there was a smile hiding behind it. She needed the car. Not just for freedom, but for something more practical. I really need a job, she admitted. Jackie perked up. I saw an ad. House cleaning. Pays well. How well? Darlene asked. $40 an hour. There was a pause. It is topless. Jackie added. Well, that explains it. Becky said. Dan leaned back thoughtfully. Do they take men? Because for that kind of money, I am willing to participate. Darlene shook her head. I will pass. But I will give your number to my sister. The room filled with laughter again. And for a moment, everything felt easy. Later that evening, Becky stood in front of them in full costume, spinning slightly as if presenting herself on a stage. Since I have all of you here, she said, I want to show you my costume. She revealed a disemboweled cheerleader look. Carefully crafted. Dramatic without being overwhelming. Dan squinted. Well, that is something. I am bringing a friend to the party. Becky added, her tone shifting slightly softer. And it might be becoming a real thing. Jackie leaned in immediately. Oh, we like the sound of that. His name is Peter, Becky said. And I do not want anyone teasing him. Dan raised both hands in mock surrender. We will behave. You have not dated anyone in a long time. Darlene added. We are not going to scare off whatever poor guy you found. Becky narrowed her eyes. I am serious. And for once, they listened. The next day was filled with preparations. Costumes were adjusted. Arguments were had. And plans were made. There was even talk of winning a local contest for the scariest family, which promised a prize that seemed far more exciting than it should have been. But not everything went smoothly. Mark came in, looking worried. They said I cannot wear my costume to the school carnival. He said quietly. Why not? Darlene asked. Because it might offend someone. The room shifted again, the humor softening into something more thoughtful. They read the email together. Rules about costumes. Rules about sensitivity. Rules about avoiding anything that could be misunderstood. Dan frowned. Halloween used to be simple. Times change. Darlene replied. Mark looked down at his carefully made costume, inspired by an artist he admired deeply. I just liked her style, he said. Darlene placed a hand on his shoulder. We will figure something out. And they tried. They debated. They adjusted. They argued with the system in their own imperfect way. At the carnival, things did not go as planned. There were rules, lines that could not be crossed, and people who stood firmly on both sides of those lines. In the end, they walked away together. Maybe we did not get it completely right, Darlene admitted. Mark shrugged. It is okay. Dan smiled slightly. What matters is we showed up for each other. That night, back at home, the doorbell rang constantly with children in costumes. Laughter echoing through the hallway. Peter arrived, polite and slightly awkward, armed with facts about Halloween that no one had asked for, but everyone ended up enjoying anyway. The house filled with conversation, mismatched personalities blending into something unexpectedly warm. Becky watched it all quietly for a moment, then smiled. Maybe this was what mattered. Not perfect costumes, not perfect rules, just people, trying their best, stumbling through, laughing when they could, and holding on to each other when things got complicated. And somewhere in the middle of it all, the chaos of the day softened into something simple. A family. Imperfect. Loud. Occasionally ridiculous. But undeniably full of life.